What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another video. Today I want to talk about a topic that I get asked about a lot, and that is how do you start immersion learning from the beginning? Now, the reason I think that people ask this a lot is because a lot of people who are doing MIA, formerly known as MIA, whatever the method is called now. I think a lot of people, like most people who go into it, it is for Japanese, and that is because they have found Matt's videos and they are wanting to learn how to learn Japanese. But the other thing is a lot of people are searching for how to learn Japanese because they've been studying Japanese for so long and they haven't really got to the area where they are comfortable with, so they try to look for an option to do that. So today I want to talk about what to do to get into immersion-based learning from scratch. Now, first and foremost, I'm not a representative. This is not a map method thing. This is what I would do if I was starting, or when I start another language, especially from scratch. This is kind of the plan that I plan on following when I go into that. So, I think the first thing is, and I'm going to break it up into two things. In this first part, you can either skip if it doesn't apply to you, or if it does, then you can do this, and then it'll probably just kind of even out and do the same. And that is that if it is a language that has a script, I would learn the script. And I guess honestly, it depends on what you are wanting. I guess realistically, if your goal isn't to be able to read perfectly, maybe not. I find that learning the script helps with picking up words. Because if I'm reading vocabulary lists, I don't have to learn the faux English version with like the English spelling. I can read the alphabet. For example, if I'm going to be learning Arabic, I will learn the Arabic script, or if I'm learning Korean, I will learn the Korean script, or anything of that nature. And I'll take just a day or two, a couple days realistically, just to familiarize myself with it. And that way I can start at least trying to piece those words together. I will still probably rely on hearing the language in order to be able to see that and kind of piece together really, but like, so I can start trying to piece it together. I remember when I started trying to read hiragana, and even like konnichiwa, I'd be like konnichiwa, like, you know what I mean? Like, and now you kind of just see it and you just run through it. But so that is the first step. Now, if you're not learning a script-based language, obviously you can skip that step. Not really a big deal. As far as how I would learn it, well, that just kind of depends. Most of the time, there's a ton of YouTube videos on how to do that. I know Go Billy Korean has an incredible course that's really quick and teaches you how to learn Hangul very, very quickly. If you're doing Korean, if you're learning Arabic, there's Learn Arabic with Maha, who teaches, it's like a 6-part course, and it's really thorough. I'm sure there's the same for Russian, Greek, Chinese, well, maybe not Chinese, but several other things. And as far as that goes, I guess the one thing would be if it was Chinese, obviously I wouldn't learn all the characters, but since they don't have like a hiragana or katakana, I would just learn those as I go via vocabulary and try to memorize those. But hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. But so yeah, the first part is I would try to learn their alphabet system. So the second part, if you're learning a language with a script, or the first part if you're not, is from there I would go into, so I should have said this at the beginning, I would be immersing while doing this. At least 30 minutes a day, preferably more. And that is just to begin acquiring the language and being able to hear where the sounds start and stop. I think that is a big part of it, which I have a question that I ask for questions for this, and there is a question about what is the point of it, and I'm going to elaborate more on that then. But for now, I would start immersing, and that is so I can start understanding or start hearing the sounds of the language, getting acquainted to it, being able to parse those sounds, because that is going to help you in the long term. So at least 30 minutes a day. Even if I'm not adding vocabulary, that's what I would do. So the second part is, after I'm doing that, again, still immersing 30 minutes, preferably more, but get at least a show in a day. That way you can start picking up those sounds. And from there, depending on how close the language is to your native, I would start adding a frequency list. Now, with Japanese, that's a little bit hard, and the reason I follow the Tango Dex is simply because it gives you the words in context, and Japanese is very, very different from English. So a lot of times those words, it's just the little nuance that it has. It's not actually a direct translation, which I think technically most languages aren't. It's just the way we interpret it. But if it was a language, for example, such as Spanish or French or something of that nature, then sure, I would just pop open a 1,000 or 2,000 frequency list, 2,000 count frequency list, add it to Anki or whatever SRS system that you enjoy, and I would just start going through maybe 10 cards a day. Now, it would be awesome if you could find cards that teaches you from a manner of in sentence contexts, and I know that starting out that's going to be really, really hard, especially if you literally don't even know how to say I am Jonathan or something of that nature. So I understand that is a little bit difficult, but it would be cool if you could find something that kind of built on that. You would need to research that on your own. Obviously, I don't have any kind of details for that, but that would definitely be really helpful. I know that there's a lot of stuff out there. I know that there's somebody who put a ton of Anki decks together for like 10 or 12 languages. It's like 10,000 sentences for these languages, and they're done from easy to hard, and it slowly ramps up. So you could perhaps search for that. If you literally search the language, most of the time it's within the top 5 or 10 search results, and so you can kind of go from there. So I would start adding that vocabulary again while watching the TV and stuff like that. And again, the reason that you're doing that is because as you're learning these words in isolation. Even if you're learning it in a sentence, it's still isolated to that exact thing. You know that sentence, right? Like if I have a card come up in Tongo and I'm like, I know the meaning, and I'm like, oh, okay, I remember that sentence was I go to the store. Oh, what is the word? What is the word for convenience store? Oh, convenient. Okay, yeah, this is this. And so being able to hear it as you're watching this and as you start to pick up these sounds and parse these sounds, well, you're going to start hearing these words that you're learning, especially if you're learning a frequency deck, because it's a frequency deck. It's literally designed for that purpose, to be able to understand a certain amount of the language. And so as you're picking that up, well, it may seem like you're not remembering it, but it's jarring your memory enough to say, hey, I've seen this word before. And then if you just look it up, if something hits you like that and you're like, I've seen that in my frequency list, pop open a dictionary, look it up, and usually that's enough to make it stick to where you'll start hearing it and just know it when you hear it in your immersion. From that point, I would do that. I would finish up a frequency list until at least maybe 2,000. For example, right now in Japanese, I'm going through Tongo. I'm starting Tongo N4. I'm going to be going through that. And once I get through N4, I think that's about 2,500 words that I will know in Japanese. And then I'm not going to worry about frequency list. I'm going to go to what I'm about to tell you, and that is sentence mining. You can start sentence mining whenever. Personally, for me, I'm starting it after I do the N4, unless it's something incredibly obvious where it's like, hey, I know this sentence. Now, what is sentence mining? I honestly need to make a whole video on this in itself in terms of what I do or have done. And that is basically you're watching these shows. I watch them with subtitles. And if you see a sentence that is 100% you know it except for one word, you copy that sentence down. And you don't have to, you literally just learn the word that you don't know via the context of it. So if you say, you know, all the words, like if you say, I'm going to go outside. I'm going to go outside and play or something like that. Let's say you don't know the word for outside and you're like, I'm going to go blank and play. And then you learn the word outside via the context of that happening. And so that's what, after I would get through the frequency list, that's where I would start. I would start going through sentence mining and trying to do that. Now, I know a lot of people shoot for a certain amount. That's kind of up to you. When I started, I wanted to do 10 a day, and then it started becoming a hassle. And then I also started realizing I didn't know quite as much as I thought I did. Therefore, I was only getting a couple, and then it was becoming this negative thing. And that's why I ultimately decided to go with the N4 deck. And so that's something that you can kind of acclimate to yourself. You can start realistically, you can start sentence mining day one. It might be a little tough because you literally know nothing. Maybe once you go through the first 10 or 20 frequency words, like maybe you can start picking something out, but you can realistically start whenever you want. That's entirely up to you. It's just for me personally, I find with learning a language, I don't want to have this negative relationship with the language. So therefore, it's easier for me to say, hey, you need to chill. You need to slowly ease into this. And that way you can kind of pick stuff up. So I would go into sentence mining. And then from there, realistically, you're kind of just sentence mining until you understand basically what you watch. If you like, because as you sentence mine more, you're going to know more, and therefore more +1 sentences or target 1 sentences or sentences where you only don't know one word come up, and then obviously as you continue to build those, they're going to come up less and less because you know everything that you're listening to. And that is where it would go, again, with immersing several times a day. Now, you can add passive immersion. A lot of people dislike the idea of passive immersion. I enjoy it personally, and that is simply from the start, while you're at work or doing something and you can't fully concentrate, just have some Japanese or Korean or Spanish or whatever it is that you're learning going on in the background. That way you can maybe pick up a word here or there, because it's kind of like in English. You may be watching this video right now and perhaps your mom or your brother or something outside is hollering about something. Whether you want to pay attention to it or not, you're going to hear them and you're going to understand at least a little bit of it, even if you're not paying attention, because you know the language. And I've had multiple times in passive immersion, maybe I'm at work doing something and I'll hear something and it just pulls me right in because I know what's being said. And that's kind of the idea. And you're, again, training your ears in order to hear that. There's also a theory behind the more that comes in, the more that your brain kind of says, hey, we need to prioritize this because it's coming in more, so we need to understand more. I don't know. I'm not getting into that because I don't know. I've not, outside of just casually looking into it, I've never really looked into it. I'm sure there's studies out there. It makes sense, but again, you can kind of judge that on your own. So hopefully that answers that. I do have some questions that I'm going to answer from my personal debate. But so just to recap, learn the script especially if you want to read and stuff of that nature. But if it's not a language that doesn't have a different script from your native language, then just go into a frequency list, start immersing as soon as possible. And I guess I should have said that I would do immersion with subtitles from the beginning, which technically counts as reading as well. But that is because it will basically help you get used to the idea of what is being said. Because a lot of times, again, in English, if you listen to this and I would subtitle what I'm saying right now, the subtitles would look a little bit different from what I'm saying. But you can also understand that, wanna is want to, or something like, you can just kind of get used to it, in that regard. So hopefully that answers it. I can't really say much past that because, I've not got to a level in Japanese of fluency. And so that's just kind of where I'm at now. Output, that's always up in the air for the MIA community. My 6-month journey I'm 6 months in as of 2 days from now, or whenever the 1st is of October. I am going to start seeking out a tutor in speaking, and that's just, I know that there's a lot of red flags about that for a lot of people, but it's just personally what I want to do for my goals. And so you can kind of make that, if you want to start speaking from the beginning, there's pros and cons for it. It depends on how you feel about sounding native or having an accent or things of that nature. But okay, so that's pretty much what I would do. And hopefully that answers your question, like the questions that I get all the time about how should I do this, especially if I'm not learning Japanese. If you want to kind of rehash what I'm saying here, you can go check out the MA Quick Start Guide. I think Matt still has that up. And if you go there, just literally replace the word Japanese with whatever language you're learning, and it's good to go. So, all right. Let me see. Let me get into these questions real quick. I didn't have a whole lot, but let me see. On Twitter, someone said, "So, could you give us advice to really get involved in the content we are consuming?" That's unfortunately not really something that I can answer because it's up to you. I love pro wrestling. I'll watch pro wrestling. I love watching people play Mario Maker. I'll watch people play Mario Maker. I could tell you to do this stuff, but if it's not something you care about, I can't. It's not really going to work, I know a lot of times people from the beginning are like, read children's books. If children's books don't interest you, you're probably going to have a hard time sticking with it. So the only advice that I have in order to enjoy the content that you're consuming or getting into the content that you're consuming is very simply try to watch stuff that you enjoy. If it's something you enjoy in English, try to watch it in your target language. Let's say you love watching basketball. Find a basketball league from that country. If you watch soccer, pretty much every country on the planet has soccer. So try to find something that you enjoy. If you enjoy horror movies, find a movie from that. So it gets a little bit trickier when you get into more so rare languages, and languages that don't necessarily have a lot of content that is exported. So that could get a little bit sticky, obviously. The other thing I would say is go to YouTube, create an account. And you can do it off your main account. That way you don't have to sign in and out. It's linked to the same account. Go to YouTube, start an account, put your location to that language, watch one video on the trending page. That way it thinks you're in that country. Everything that'll be recommended to you will be in that language. I do that for Japanese, and going forward with other languages, that is something I am going to do. So that's just maybe a little bit of a way that you can kind of help. But again, I can't really say. In terms of motivation, perhaps, because I guess people are like, I'm not motivated if I don't understand it. I wish I had a magic pill for that. That is my motivation. I wish I could tell you how to turn that into your motivation, because I know some people just can't do that. But to me, when I watch something and I don't understand it, it makes me want to watch it more because I want to understand it. And I wish that I could help you, but I can't. So, all right, let's see. Questions on YouTube. How can immersion help with anything other than accent if you're a beginner to the language? It helps you parse the sounds. That way, when people are speaking, you can understand them. I know tons of people who have learned a language, and when they go out and use it, they will say stuff because they've practiced, but they haven't listened enough, and so they'll always have to tell people to slow down, which again, some people may not mind, and that's perfectly fine. And then also from where they're used to hearing stuff in a completely segmented way of this book says this book says that, they're not used to the way that people actually speak. They've learned a textbook version of the book, of the language, which is still very helpful. However, there's a lot of stuff that's just not said the way that it is in books that they say in the streets, so to speak. And so it just gets you used to the natural way that people speak. And again, mainly being the listening portion of it. That way you're not constantly slow down, what, slow down one more time. You can at least pick up a pattern or a pace, and you've learned how to parse the words. When I'm listening to people speak Japanese, for the most part, I can pick out the words and parse the sounds. That way, I mean, I can at least piece it together in my head, and then I can go from there for looking stuff up. And I don't know, it's helped me a ton. I mean, if it's not something you're interested in, I mean, I guess whatever, but I mean, it's just part of immersion learning. So, I don't know, hopefully that answers. Starting from the beginning. Then after this, okay, let me get rid of that. Is Goldberg your favorite wrestler? That's not related to this, but no. How is your definition of immersion learning? I mean, just immersion learning is just that. It's using your vocabulary from an SRS system and proceeding to watch stuff and try to pick that up. You can go a ton of different ways from that. I know, for example, Dave from Otaku does a ton of stuff with like subs to SRS. And I mean, there's a ton of different methodologies for the idea of immersion, but it's basically acquiring a language the way that you acquire your native language, which is through massive amounts of immersion. Should we start immersion learning as an absolute beginner, or should you learn a little bit before doing immersion? I would say definitely do it from the beginning. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it's just because of the idea of trying to acclimate yourself to the sounds of the language. And that way it's a little bit easier to pick up. And the more that you hear sound, the more that you can get into it. I had an example where I listened to something the other day, and in Japanese, sometimes they will end a sentence, or not end a sentence, but it's like, I guess a grammar pattern where they use ga instead of ka, like a question, but it'll be in the same spot that ka would. And just for listen, I know it sounds ridiculous, but when they're speaking in regular speed, it was really hard for me to hear if they were saying ka or ga, just because of the way they would say it. But with hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of listening, I can pretty much pick that up now, and it's not really an issue. So it's one of those things where I've become used to something before I knew I needed to be used to it because of the amount of listening that I was doing. So I would definitely say from the beginning. That's my own personal opinion, and I think that's kind of the core of what we'll call it, the Matt vs. Japan approach, or yoga approach, whatever you want to call it, Matt vs. Japan approach. And so it's turned my Japanese around, that's for sure. So I would definitely say from the beginning. Comprehensible input makes sense. When you're starting from absolute zero, nothing is comprehensible. Can you explain how to bridge that initial gap? Continue adding vocabulary. I mean, that's you everything that you're listening to slowly becomes more comprehensible because you're continuing to add vocabulary. As you continue to add vocabulary, you're going to pick up more words, because the first time you listen to this, you may understand 3 of the 7 words in the sentence. As you add vocabulary, especially as you add the frequency list, you might understand 5 words, but because you can understand those 5 words, contextually, you can get the gist of the sentence and you can pretty much figure out what they're meaning anyway without having to add those words onto it. So it's just one of those things that just over the course of time, it gradually gets there. Let me see. Many people in the AJAT MI community are doing Asian languages. Can you explain the process for something that should be easier to acquire for a native English speaker, such as French or Spanish? I think I did that. Hopefully I did that well enough. The closer the language to your native language, the easier it'll be to acquire, right? That is true. So maybe there's a different approach or same approach, but will likely be a faster timeline. Yeah, it's the same approach. It'll just be faster. I know Matt just had a video on his channel with a dude who learned Spanish in like 10 months. And it was using an immersion based approach. So you can perhaps look into that, look at his video. But yeah, if it's closer to your target language, if it's closer to your native language, you're going to be able to do it. Honestly, realistically, 6 months into Japanese, if I were to be doing what I'm doing right now in Spanish, I would probably be not great, and I definitely try to never use the F word, but I would probably be pretty solid in Spanish, especially since I already had a grasp on it, but because of it being just easier to understand and easier to pick up words than Japanese is. So yeah, I would say the same approach, just it would just happen faster. So that is all the questions, and that is everything that I had. Hopefully that helped. If not, please let me know down below, and I will try to respond to your comments in a timely fashion and in a way that I can kind of hopefully make it make more sense. If there's enough questions, maybe I'll just do another whole like question and answer things about that. But that's pretty much it. Like I said, it's just start watching your target language, listening to your target language, adding your frequency list, and just slowly over the course of time, you start picking stuff up as you become more acquainted with the language. The idea of immersion before you're fluent or before you understand is simply to get used to the sounds. That way you've already cut that portion out. You don't have to worry about learning the language and then it's like, oh, I know it, but now I can't understand anything because they speak so fast. You've already kind of unlocked the ability to hear it because you've been doing it so much. So that is it. Like I said, if you have any questions at all, please let me know down below and I will help. I'm going to try to wrap this video up here because it is 22 minutes. But yeah, so thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for 2,000 subscribers. That is one of the craziest feelings that I've ever had in my life. So thank you all for that. Month 6, I am going to do a month 6 update within the next week or so. And I'll try to do another live stream here soon. Thanks to everyone who supports me, whether you are just a viewer here, you follow me on any social media at Seabolt Speaks, you're in the Discord, you support me on Patreon, like these cool people here on the screen. You can go check out my Patreon at patreon.com/SeaboltSpeaks. And yeah, thanks everybody. Thank you so much. I hope this video helped. And trying to think of anything else. That's what's crazy about my editing style is I don't edit, and it's all just shoot from the hip. But I think that's it. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next video.